And one of the legacies, I'm certain, would be if he acquired extra territory for the United States.
We've got chaos in Canada. Welcome back to Moose on Loose. My name's David. Today's top story here. We're talking tariffs, Donald Trump. This is causing mass mayhem in our country. There's no doubt about it. We've got all the ministers have met today, aside from Danielle Smith and David Eby, who were virtual. All the rest flew together. They had this big meeting talking about Donald Trump and the potential tariffs that will be coming on Monday or Tuesday or whenever he decides to do it, if he's going to do it. Danielle Smith has gone rogue on this situation. She won't back the plan from the government. Let's jump into this. First off, we got this report here. It says 74,000 Canadians have perished while waiting for healthcare since 2018, according to a new report. That is sad. This is the state of Canada right now. We also got this one here from Canada Proud. It says Trudeau Liberals used taxpayer dollars to conduct public opinion polls on the idea of home equity tax. Justin Trudeau has repeatedly denied that his government is considering such a tax. Of course, he would lie about doing this. Another idea has emerged from the housing town halls is a sliding scale of capital gains tax on the sale of principal residences. 50% tax after 1 year of ownership, 25% after 2 years, 15% after 3 years, 10% after 4 years, 5% after 5. This would be nasty if they put this in. As for the premiers and the town hall they had today, Justin Trudeau gave one of his speeches that's just rambling as usual. But Doug Ford came out swinging here, rocking the Canada is not for sale hat.
We need to unite, and we cannot let President Trump divide us. He'll be being sworn in a week, and then he's going to lay the tariffs on Canada. He's going to try to devastate our country. He's going to try to divide our country, and we cannot have division in our country. I understand that all around the country, everyone has their concerns, their jurisdictions from coast to coast to coast. But there's one thing that's more important than jurisdictions, is standing up for the country. Country comes first over anything, and we're going to continue to fight against these tariffs, and we're going to use every tool in our toolbox to make sure that happens.
Danielle Smith, Canada and the world, cut off oil.
Well, we're going to discuss that. I've negotiated a lot of deals through the private sector and the public sector. I think everyone here and everyone across the country, you don't show your hand in the middle of a poker game to the opposition. That's what I'm saying. Everyone I respect, be it Premier Smith or any other premiers with their opinion, that's why we're coming together. But I can tell you one thing, you have to hold on to the tools that you have and make sure that they understand when they attack our country, when they attack our people, when they attack the jobs of the hardworking Canadians, you can't sit back and say, keep attacking. You have to hit back with every single tool we have in our toolbox. And that's the message to the premiers today. They may agree, they may disagree, but I can tell you one thing, there's nothing more important than our country and protecting jobs right across the country.
So it's hard to hear, but they asked about Danielle Smith. She's essentially gone rogue. She's not supporting the general consensus of the other premiers. So what basically happened here, Danielle Smith came out and said, no, I'm not going to sign your guys' plan. I'm not going to be part of that. They want to have this grand show of power. And she refused because it would involve putting tariffs on oil coming from Alberta down to the States. She said, no, I will not do that. And this is really divided because now you've got, as you've seen, Doug Ford here saying, you can't show your cards. You can't make the negotiations easy by taking that tool off the table. And that's the biggest one we have. That essentially hamstrings the negotiation. They can't push back at Trump as hard. That's what they're saying. We've also got Andrew Furey, who said the same thing here. I should note before I play this clip, which is actually a great clip, there's a really good back and forth between Andrew Furey and Vasi here. I've broken down the situation and put it in a graph so it's very easy for everyone to see. I don't know why our government hasn't done this, so stay tuned for that because it really puts in perspective the situation.
The Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador here with me live, Andrew Furey. Now, hi, Premier, good to see you.
Hey, how are you?
I appreciate you making the time.
Happy to.
So the clips we were just playing there were from premiers reacting to the fact that you all seem fairly unified in the room, but there's one premier from Alberta who says she can't endorse the federal government's plan because of the sort of issue around energy. You preside over a province that has a lot of energy that goes to the United States. Are you comfortable with the positioning of everything right now?
Well, look, what I would say is whenever you start a game or whenever you start a series of negotiations, you need to start with all the pieces on the board. So by that, I mean, if you're taking chess as an example, you're not going to start without your queen on the board. It doesn't mean that you use your queen. It means you use your queen strategically, but the queen has to be on the board. So even though I am an energy exporter and it makes up 20% of our GDP, I am content with the strategy that's been laid out by the federal government, that there will be a proportional response. By the way, we hope there's no tariffs or taxes to Americans, because that's the best outcome in this scenario. But if there,
I like that analogy with the Queen. That is exactly what this is. The oil that we sell to America at $25 US per barrel under market value as of November 2023 prices, as I was compiling this graph, that is our largest single queen in this case. Doug Ford, Andrew Furey, and a lot of the other premiers are arguing we shouldn't be showing their queen. Danielle Smith doesn't see it that way, though.
there needs to be a firm, strong, sovereign, united response to the United States.
And if in fact that sort of quote unquote nuclear option has to be pursued, and you're right, we don't know that it will have to, because we don't exactly know. We only know what Donald Trump has threatened. We don't know what's going to happen on Monday. But if in fact it does, were there assurances provided to premiers like yourself who preside over those energy exporting provinces that, you know, the federal government would act to make you whole, for lack of a better term?
Sure. I mean, I don't want to reveal the private conversations of the meetings, but certainly one of my questions was, in the case of impacts to any industry, frankly, energy or otherwise, if the federal government would use all the tools that are not available to subnationals, like monetary policy, access to the Canadian Treasury, to help support not just the industries, but the hardworking women and men in those industries. So that is certainly a source of conversation that is ongoing. We were given reassurances by the Prime Minister that there would be support, as he has been there, as the federal government has been there in times of crisis before, like COVID-19. Just to pick up on the first question, though, I do think it's really short-sighted to begin negotiations with everything not on the table. And I think what you heard today was everyone is prepared in a strategic and united way, in the interest of Canada, to put everything, their own interests aside, on the table in order to create the best starting point for negotiation.
Are you saying that Premier Smith is not willing to put her own interests aside, or her own province's interests aside?
I mean, we would have to ask her that question, but I would say that I don't understand the strategic thinking behind her statements.
The reason why she's defending Alberta oil and won't use that as a bargaining chip, as someone who was born and raised in Alberta, I'm an Albertan. I've also lived in British Columbia for almost 20 years now, and I've also lived in Ontario for 3 years. Albertans don't get the same inclusion of the rest of Canada. You see it with the equalization payments. The lion's share comes from Alberta, goes out to the other provinces, and it doesn't come back to Alberta. The Liberal government, Justin Trudeau, all his cronies, his den of thieves, have been treating Danielle Smith and Alberta like the redheaded stepchild, like the black sheep, this entire time. She's doing what's best for Albertans and for the economy in Alberta. So it really is this situation where, like, Team Canada approach, I totally get it. We should be doing that. But then also I get it as being an Albertan myself. I know that feeling where it doesn't really feel like Alberta is sometimes a part of Canada. We're kind of on the outs, always getting the snub from the government. It's a really hard situation because I understand both paths that's going on here, and this isn't going to be pretty.
As an energy exporter, we all export different goods and services, but as an energy exporter, I see that the pain that can come, but we want to not have to face that pain. But by taking that off the table immediately means that we have definitively reduced our negotiating strategy, and I think it's a really short-sighted view. And this is my concern, it has been from day one in these discussions, in the interest of solving an acute fiscal economic issue, that we allow ourselves to fall into a trap of having discussions on Canadian unity or Canadian identity. And I'm very cognizant and aware of that trap, and I don't think it's one that any premiers or any citizens, frankly, should succumb to. We're in a very strong negotiating position as Canadians. We can't be afraid to own that, but we can't be afraid to lean into it when negotiating against the strongest economic force in the world.
And I certainly...
The problem with that is Danielle Smith was not getting support from the other premiers when Justin Trudeau kept on stepping on Alberta. And now that Trudeau and the Liberals need the oil industry now to bail them out, Danielle Smith's like, don't think so. This is a sticky situation.
I do understand that from where you sit, but like I get your point that the federal government has always been there to be supportive, but you're a Liberal.
Not always.
No, in this one, you're saying this federal government. I would pose it that, having worked in Alberta for a number of years, Albertans don't feel the same way. Yep. And Danielle Smith certainly would not feel the same way. And I know there's politics involved in all of that, but I can foresee a scenario in which she thinks that the resources that keep people in her province employed are going to be sold out to their detriment, and they won't be made whole, because there have been many instances before where they feel that's been the case.
Sure, and I think every region of the country feels at times friction with the federal government. We have a $1 billion oil find off our shore. Labradors that was held up by the current Minister of Energy that caused delays in investment timelines, and that's a problem for us in Newfoundland and Labrador. The carbon tax is a problem for us in Newfoundland and Labrador. Equalization.
What? The carbon tax? They have no problem saying what they want now that Trudeau's said he's going to step down. I should note too, he also said today he won't be running for re-election. I'll show it in the next video. But Trudeau is completely clocked out.
Equalization is a problem for us in Newfoundland and Labrador. We can all have our friction and our issues with the federal government. In fact, that probably makes us stronger as a country. But when you're starting a negotiation, you don't start by saying we're never going to talk about, you're selling your house, we're never going to talk about the pool, we're never going to talk about the blinds, we're only going to talk about, the living room. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
I mean, it depends. If you have the guest house out back and pushed a family member out there to live by themselves and they never get to come in for family dinners, suddenly the house burns down, all that's left is the pool house. Everyone's be knocking on the door, hey, can we sleep in here? And say, I don't know if there's room. That's the situation we've got. And this is all stemming from Justin Trudeau being an absolute bonehead and running our country like an absolute doofus. There shouldn't be these emissions caps that Guilbeault put in. He shouldn't have been treating Alberta like the black sheep. I'm curious to see what happens from this.
So I think, hopefully, by the way, to be fair to the Premier, she's only commented on the fact that she's opposed to export tariffs on oil and gas. So that's not to say that she's opposed to the entire plan and has been laid out. So again, I would never pretend to speak for her, but it is in my opinion, everything needs to be on the table when you're starting negotiating with the strongest economic partner in the world, the strongest economy in the world. It's not to say that we will use every piece on the chessboard, but every piece does have to be on the chessboard for the opening moves.
Technically, she could say in private, okay, so let's say that we might use it, but behind closed doors, I'm telling you right now, we're not putting tariffs on that. That would still have the optics that she's willing to go forward with that. And she's not going to do that and portray that image to Albertans. So it's a sticky situation.
Heard from you and many of your counterparts, at that press conference about other efforts that are underway to engage, right? Yep. To try and, if at all possible, avoid the application, but even if they are applied to, convince essentially people who would have the president's ear, what do we know to be true, that this is going to be detrimental for Americans and the American economy. The situation domestically, though, for President Trump is different than it was the first go around, right? Like, he doesn't have to worry about re-election. He won a decisive victory. I have not seen, even despite all his engagement efforts so far, his rhetoric calm down at all when it comes to Canada. In fact, it's become more inflamed. Do you think those efforts will be fruitful? Are you worried they will not be? I'm
very worried, and I think it was on your show that I expressed immediate concern with what many took as a joke in terms of the 51st state. I don't appreciate it. It's not funny. And if you look at his style of behavior in the past, he starts with a joke. All of a sudden, the joke becomes, serious questions, and then those serious questions become policy, and then that policy becomes enacted. So I think we have to treat this moment, not just in the acuity of the fiscal and economic realities, but we have to treat this moment of our national identity and sovereignty extremely seriously.
I gotta say, it was pretty funny when he first did that, trolling Trudeau, making fun of him. What's not funny is him continually doing it to the point now where not only Canadians, but you have Americans who are getting stressed out about this. I'm seeing vloggers commenting when they're in Costco and other places saying, oh, well, I buy this product, but it comes from Canada. Watch out, the price on this is about to go way up. They're all worried about it. They're worried about their oil and gas. I mean, they live a very cheap life down there because of us. And I've got the chart here to show it. We'll finish this first and then I'll show you guys.
And you're right. He is not a president who has any accountability. He's not going to seek re-election unless he changes the Constitution. He is someone who's been prone to want to leave legacies. And one of the legacies, I'm certain, would be if he acquired extra territory for the United States, whether that's Panama, Greenland, or others around the continent of North America.
Okay,
I 100% agree with that. I think he wants his legacy to be like, I'm the guy who added Greenland to America or whatever. I think that's 100% on point. What I've got here is a graph I've put together based off of just data I could find. Now, our government should go through and do this with exact numbers. I don't know why they haven't done this, because just looking at the graph makes it very simple. So what we've got here, the light yellow is 2023, the darker orange here is 2024. And as you can see here, this is Canada exports to the US. So this is the money we are making from America. This is the money America is making from us, their exports to us. This one here is the amount of savings they get by buying our oil, $25 US per barrel under market price. It's about $36 billion. These are in billions on the side here. This here is the amount of money when they take take our oil, so out of this category here, about $117 billion of oil we sell to America. They then process that, turn it around and sell it back to us and around the world. This is the money they're making off of our oil. So if they don't get our oil, they do not make this money. So if you add in the amount of money they're making off of us, the money they're saving off our oil, the money they're making off our oil, you add that up, you get this. This is the total. And just putting this side by side, here's the amount of money that Canada makes off US. Here's the amount of money US makes off of Canada. We are subsidizing them. The reason why their gas is cheap, their life is cheap, all their goods are cheap is because of us. We are the best neighbor they've ever had. This is the best relationship they've ever had. We should be processing our own oil and making ourselves rich. I don't know why we aren't. It's stupid. For Trump to come out and do this is really dumb, because once Poilievre gets in, starts building a bunch of refineries and we refine our own oil, this is going to switch and their oil is going to be more expensive. Their gasoline is going to be more expensive. Their food will go up in prices. It's not a smart move. He's poked the wrong bear with this situation, I think. Our government should come out and use exact numbers, create a graph like this, and then they should be creating a social media campaign using data, charts, and numbers and post it all over social media just like Donald Trump would do, but post it down in America. Pay for ads going to all the refinery workers and anyone who would be affected in America. It's going to be a lot of people. But instead, Justin Trudeau's twiddling his thumbs and sucking his thumb under his desk. It's disgraceful. I mean, we've got lame duck, I'm busy, guys, playing Sudoku. He's had a lot of time to prepare for this situation. And what does he do? He goes skiing. He goes snowboarding at multiple resorts. He takes a vacation while thousands of jobs are at risk. I believe Doug Ford said there's upwards of 500,000 jobs in Canada would be affected by this. 500,000 jobs could be lost in our country. And you look at how many would be lost in America. Once again, all this work here, this is American work that we are sending them. They wouldn't get this anymore. You see, if we took this and stuck this on top of ours, we'd be way up here and America would be down here. There'd be a huge disparity the other direction. So after 9 years vilifying Alberta's energy sector, now they want Alberta to work with them. Exactly. Where's Stephen Guilbeault now? He climbing another building? Now they want to work with Alberta. Look at all these comments. Alberta should use its leverage now to get the egress it needs for oil and gas. That's an interesting point. Ditch equalization. Jumping over to this clip, there's an interesting panel going back and forth on this situation.
Look, what do you make of this sort of the way in which everyone came out and then the statement that followed from Alberta's premier?
It's odd, but it's not surprising, to be honest. Those are the kind of signals and messaging that she's been using. It's toned down from what we've heard in the past, but the question is, where is she? Most Canadians, most Albertans, when they're coming out of the holiday season, they just don't go on vacation right away. They go back to work, and if there's a time to be at work, it's right now. Like mere days before those tariffs are maybe going to be put in place by President Trump. So it's puzzling, and it shows that there's no united front in Canada. There's some premiers, and one premier in particular, that is not on side. Others that were not so keen seem to jump on the bandwagon today.
Yeah.
We're just going to take a look at Danielle Smith's statement. Just so it's clear here, she released this. It said full statement, no Ottawa tariffs on Alberta energy exports. I had a constructive discussion with my fellow premiers on how best to deal with the threat of tariffs from the incoming U.S. administration. We agreed on several strategies, etc., etc. Alberta will simply not agree to export tariffs on our energy and other products, nor do we support a ban on exports of these same products. We will take whatever actions are needed to protect the livelihoods of Albertans from such destructive federal policies. This is what happens when you crap on Alberta too much. Where's Stephen Guilbeault? Maybe the first step would be to get that little rat out of his cave and have him apologize to Alberta and Danielle Smith for being an absolute terror on the oil industry. That would be the first step, honestly. If you want to read the full thing here, it's on her X account.
Particularly opening the door to a ban on energy export. I think that's better position than trying to stand alone somehow and not be part of Team Canada.
I think Carl's point, Marika, about other premiers kind of being less specific about their opposition to the prospective export taxes, for example, or banning energy efforts. I would include Scott Moe. Like, I just interviewed him, and he was not necessarily saying go for it, but he was definitely not being as upset or angry about the prospect of it, saying it would come way down the road, even if at all, and that there is agreement on other things that they could take away. What do you make of all of that?
Yeah, I think that the premiers who were at the table in Ottawa actually made the case quite credibly against what Ms. Smith has been saying, that they shouldn't take things off the table, that it weakens their hand when they're dealing with Donald Trump, when Canada already has a weak position, frankly, going into this. The U.S. holds the cards, and that's very clear from all the statements from the premiers and the Prime Minister today. Everybody's in this sort of wait-and-see kind of give yourself a bear hug Canada moment.
They don't hold all the cards, though. I mean, Pierre Poilievre is the only one to come out and say, let's go talk to the workers, send this message out to all the workers in America. Because you get Trump supporters in America revolting back against this idea that's going to hurt their jobs to Trump. Imagine if a whole bunch of Republicans started sending messages to all their government offices, their constituents, their representatives in their states. Trump might get some phone calls from different governors and people saying, hey, man, you need to cut that out because our own workers are pissed off what you're doing. This is the right approach. I think there should be a social media campaign, have some simple, basic graphs that show how bad it's going to hurt American workers versus the approach they're taking now. It seems they're not even focusing on the American side, which is the way to go.
And because we don't necessarily know what will happen on January 20th. And so there's this raw Team Canada and not a lot of actual concrete information they can share with Canadians. I think Ms. Smith really undercut her argument and undercut her position by joining the meeting from some tropical location and not coming to Canada for such a consequential meeting, not coming to Ottawa, to Canada also for such a consequential meeting. But I also think, the points she has made over the last few days are not wrong. The federal government has not done anything to curry favor with her or her province in this moment, when now that sector is such a huge leverage point with the Trump administration.
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways to look at it, Jamie. I think I do understand the vantage point of premiers who are saying this undercuts their negotiating prospects collectively. I also, I was saying this to Premier Fury earlier on the show, having worked in Alberta, do understand the sentiment among Albertans and the politicians who represent them that despite promises for a federal government to be there for them in the event that they are disproportionately impacted, they might not believe the federal government will actually have their back.
Yeah, I think the deep-seated Western alienation has a very long history in this country, especially with you look at when Trudeau is in the Prime Minister's office. And so notwithstanding some of the change being afoot, I think there's some really real concerns there. I also think, picking up on something Marika just said, it's quite easier for Danielle Smith to take a more bombastic contrary position where she's effectively literally mailing it in and sending a written statement and popping in on a video feed, rather than actually being in the room with her fellow premiers for hours on end today working through this. I think the reality, if we look at where we're at, Fasci, is none of them actually know what's going to happen. None of them know how serious it's going to get, and none of them know the details of what the Americans are going to impose. And so the premiers are gathered today as a machinery of government, as heads of government, to suss out what the options are and kind of put everything literally on the table in a very making the sausage standpoint, where the reality is they don't even know what the main meat going into the sausage is going to be because they don't know what yet they're responding to. So I think a lot of this is kind of political posturing, and it was easier for Danielle Smith to essentially play to her Alberta audience, where it's not even just anti-Trudeau, but anti-Ottawa resentment runs incredibly deep. And I think that's part of the dynamic of what you're seeing with the end of day of today's meetings.
And that's exactly it. They don't even know if he's putting this tariff on or not. I think they should have tried to reach out to as many organizations in America that will be directly affected by this, auto industry, the oil industry, start calling them up, start sending them stuff, make some graphs, make some charts, put out some real data, and really scare them so they start making calls. The Americans need to be fearing this situation. There needs to be a ruckus down there that makes its way to Trump, and Trump gets a little bit rattled. It's like, oh, I'm rattling my own base. Instead, they're focusing on, oh, maybe we could put tariffs on Heinz ketchup and Florida orange juice and all this kind of thing again. Like, that's the wrong approach here.
To Jamie's point, though, that sentiment runs deep in Saskatchewan as well, Saeed. And Premier Moe is not taking the same posture tonight that Danielle Smith was, even though in principle he also opposes those ideas. You could tell, sort of what happened throughout the day was, and just for some background context, there were supposed to be separate press conferences. They weren't even supposed to be in the same room at the end of the day. And ultimately a decision was made for them to all do that, I think, to present sort of this idea of a united front, even visually, to Canadians.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think visually it definitely landed. I think many Canadians who are seeing this are actually seeing the fact that their government is to respond.
Basically, you can't hear him for this, and you can see Vasi here now. She's completely confused. She doesn't know what to do here because you can't hear the guy.
It's pretty consequential. I mean, Alberta specifically.
You can't make it out.
On many U.S. businesses.
So this goes on, and she's just kind of frozen because she's like, oh, what do I do? Because he kind of pops in and out. I'll show you a clip of that. So here's their closing statements. This is what they're talking about. They're all lined up here.
Bon après-midi tout le monde. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today. Before I begin, I just want to say a few words.
Yeah, we don't want to hear any more words from you, Trudeau.
And be proud. Even when it comes down to going into your local retailer, look at the back of the label. If it doesn't say made in Canada, pick the can beside it that does say made in Canada.
Yeah, I've never made any secret with respect to where we have differed on policy with the federal Liberal government and the Prime Minister at times. And
So they all go through here and basically give their 2 cents.
I hope that there's Canadian pride in the fact that you can have Liberals and Conservatives and New Democrats and nonpartisan leaders coming together.
Look at Vassie's face. She's panicked.
Data center as well. We want to solicit some investments from the U.S. on.
Where does this go from here? Jamie's point about we don't know what the heck is going to happen is a salient one. We know what Donald Trump is threatening. And if that comes to fruition on Monday, we're looking at a pretty different world on Tuesday.
Yeah, and so hopefully they prepare for the worst case scenario, and they're ready for it, and they're ready to move early, because you cannot let that percolate. You need to show that Canada is ready to take a stand, and will take a stand and will defend its interest, and that the provincial premiers, most of them anyway, are on board. Because if you don't do that, then you can just see an escalation of the problems that will arise from that, and Donald Trump will benefit by winning, and that's all he wants. He wants to be the winner, and we'll see, starting next week, if he is actually a winner when it comes to relationship between our 2 countries.
Marika, what are you watching for next week?
Well, other than the tariff thing, I think it's important to point out, the federal government and the premiers today kind of laid into doubt whether those tariffs are coming, but Doug Ford and Danielle Smith have been very clear in the past that they are coming. I think it's also really interesting to note the Toronto Star is reporting that Canada won't do a dollar-for-dollar tariff, retaliatory tariff, because of arguments that would hurt Canada's economy even more. That's in stark contrast to what we're hearing Chrystia Freeland would be proposing. So I think we're...
I mean, Jagmeet's come out with that as well. They need to hit Trump where it hurts. He's a family man. They need to run some ads, have some solid data, and show how it hurts families. Families in Canada, families in America are worried. They're stressed out because of this situation. It's causing so much mental anguish to many people. They need to take an emotional approach and use some solid data and really hit America right in its core with this. They should be going right to their refineries and sending them reports and saying, you're all going to get laid off if Trump puts tariffs on Canada. This is really just sad because Poilievre should be in power right now. Trudeau should have called an election already, and he would already be enacting the right strategy to deal with the situation. But instead, Captain Schmuck doing his best to just crash this ship into the biggest iceberg he can find. I didn't see it. I was playing Sudoku.
Seeing a bit of the veil lifted on maybe the disagreements within the government. It seems like Canada is trying to take a more gradual, more measured approach, but there's just everything to look forward to or to look to come Monday.
Jamie, last word to you. I've got about 25 seconds.
Yeah, I think with the ongoing power vacuum as a result of Justin Trudeau resigning, coupled with Doug Ford effectively basing his whole re-election campaign, if rumors are to be true, that he's going to go to the polls early after the premiers come back from Washington, he's controlling the agenda, he's controlling the meeting, and I think he's going to use that to his advantage. I think there's serious national unity issues at play here, and we can't take what Premier Smith is saying and just say, oh, Alberta's being Alberta. But regardless of what happens, this is going to be an absolute mess. In addition to dealing with the actual economic reality of it, every single premier is going to have a political issue on their hand, and it's probably better they hang together. Otherwise, we're definitely all going to hang alone.
I mean, the first step, I already mentioned it. Have Stephen Guilbeault come out and apologize to Alberta and Canadians for being a climate zealot, an absolute nutcase that has been hurting the Alberta oil industry, which is the backbone of Canada and how our entire country functions. It's just pathetic and sad. We've got lame duck Justin Trudeau. If you watch the long form videos of him talking and stuff, he's just doing the more drama performance. He doesn't care. He's checked out. I feel like this is just the beginning of this bumpy ride. This isn't the end of the ride. What'll be interesting come Monday if Donald Trump says, yeah, I'm not going to put any tariffs on there. Who knows? Time will tell.